This is better. This is better.
All right, Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and welcome back to Daybreak Live, where we get together a couple times a month and talk about all things literary. Today, we have our regular guest, whom we've gotten to know so well over the last several months, who's been helping us along our journey as writers, from ideas to writing styles and writing tips, to outlines, to ways to get published, different places to get published. And today we're going to talk about finding our niche for our brand, our niche for our books, just finding a way to get ourselves into the literary community and building our own community, inshallah. So our beautiful regular guest is Muti'ah Badruddeen, who grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, and claims Ibadan as the hometown of her heart. Am I saying it right? Ibadan. Self-proclaimed. Okay, alhamdulillah. I know I should make the phonetical marks on there. A self-proclaimed bibliophile who reads everything except fantasy and paranormal, which is what good authors do, read and read and read. Muti'ah started writing in high school, handwritten stories in lined notebooks, invariably filled with teenage drama, American high school themes, and foreign named characters. Don't we all remember when that was the only kind of literature that was available?
That existed.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, we've grown out of that with your help. Her writing has improved somewhat since then. She does note that her writing has improved somewhat since then. When she's not reading and writing, or doctoring, or parenting, or educating, I'm going to add that. It's not in there, but I know you do that. Muti'ah can be found watching documentaries on historical and social justice issues, exploring physical bookshops with her children, or our favorite movie of all time, sleeping. When I was a teacher, they used to ask us, what are you going to do in the summer? What are you going to do? Like, the first thing I'm going to do is sleep. She also enjoys building elaborate fantasies of what her life would be like if she didn't have to work. In many ways, Muti'ah is the reserved bookworm from her adolescence. No, she's a book dragon now, I gotta say. She is still figuring out these newfangled means of human connectedness called social media. She can be found on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at the handle @DeenProgress. DEENPROGRESS, @DeenProgress. Welcome, Muti'ah.
Thank you so much. I think you're the only one who uses this bio, and it's interesting to me whenever I hear you read out loud. Like, oh my goodness! Alhamdulillah, thank you for having me.
I have an old bio that's still up online and that people still use sometimes, and then I go, oh my gosh, I have to change that. And then the minute I finish whatever it is, that I'm like, I never think about it again.
And then you just forget about it.
It only occurs to me to change it when it's actually being used, and then I forget.
Somebody's using it. Yeah, when somebody's using that, you'll be thinking, oh my god, I actually did that. Actually wrote that a while ago.
All right, so tell us about finding our niche. Subhanallah, we all have a niche, especially, first of all, we have the niche of probably being Muslim kind of authors. I'm sure, alhamdulillah, we have other audience members by now who aren't Muslim, but that are just writers. But even if people are not Muslim, there's always a niche you can find. Yeah. How can we take advantage of the niche that we feel we fit?
Well, I think that coming into the writing space, especially as a new writer, as a new author, you don't even think about, your niche or your brand Actually, you don't even think about the word brand until you come to marketing, and the marketing people start using it. But generally speaking, you don't even think that you should or you do have a niche as a new writer, because you're just thinking, I'm just writing and my story is totally original, and But then if you've been there a while, long enough, you soon realize that there's no story that is truly original. There's nothing that hasn't been said before. The only original thing you're bringing to this whole game is yourself, your own, experiences, your own voice, so to speak, your own life view, such that then that old story becomes something as new. And that's exactly what your niche is. That you that you bring into whatever stories you are writing, that's what your niche is. And like I said, you don't think about it at first, and it doesn't begin to occur to you until maybe you've done some significant amount of writing, and then you find a thread. You realize that there is a thread that does go through almost every piece of work that you have written, and that's where your niche is. I remember the first time I recognized my niche was when someone, I think it was on Instagram, I said, "Do you realize that you have recurring characters?" I was like, "Do you mean like specific characters?" Or she's like, "No, like just generally speaking, you have, you always have, you always have in your hobby. Your characters are usually, Yoruba, Nigerian, Muslim women who are like upper middle class to upper class. They are like, you always have a niqabi, you always have a Muslim man who is treating his wife right. You always have like some people who are considering or doing polygamy. You always," and she started listing all those things, and I was like, I went back and I started looking through my work. Like, she's right. SubhanAllah, she's like literally very right. There's almost nothing that I have written that doesn't have almost every one of these things in it. It's very eye-opening, I suppose, for you as an author when you get to that point, as a writer, when you get to that point and you realize that, oh, okay, yeah, definitely, there's something. Not to say that there aren't people who, go into writing knowing that this is what they are coming with. I mean, I came into writing knowing that I wanted to write stories of Nigerian Muslim women living their best possible lives while dealing with what it means to be a Muslim woman in today's, world, the challenges, the triumphs, the everything. So I knew those were the kind of stories I wanted to tell. But I didn't even recognize, what my personal niche would be until she called my attention to it. If I'm going to use another example, I wanted to submit to one particular literary journal once. And so I went to read their submission guidelines. And everything was looking dandy, and I was like, yes, yes, yes. Until I got to a point and they had a very, very hard limit for anything alluding to sexual violence. It was a thing, it was a very hard limit that they had put in their submission notice. And then I realized that, okay, every single short story that I had, I was working on, that I thought I could possibly submit, had some form of allusion to sexual violence. I couldn't submit for this, And then I thought, okay, maybe later I'd find something else. Except that I don't have anything that doesn't have an allusion to sexual violence against women and girls. I don't know if that's, because of my day work as an obstetrician gynecologist, if that's because of my experience as, a woman speaking from, sub-Saharan African kind of people you mix with, the kind of stories we hear. But there is literally nothing I have ever written that is totally free of any allusion to sexual violence. I don't know what that world would look like. Do you understand?
Yes.
I do not know.
Yes. I don't. It's interesting that you explore why that might be by thinking about being an OBGYN, by thinking about being I don't think that it's that limited. I think that in so many, like everybody knows someone, or everyone has experienced, or everyone, like why, like that's women's experience, period.
Exactly. And it becomes a thing where I didn't set out to write stories about sexual violence. It wasn't a thing. But when I read that limit and the limit said no allusion whatsoever, I started reading through my work and I realized it's not possible. I don't have, there's
Yeah,
almost always something because I don't know that world. I cannot
yeah.
conceptualize that world
It's unrealistic.
where
Yeah,
there will be no, you understand? So
yeah.
yeah. What was the point of all of that? So the point of that is, I mean, I do go out writing about sexual violence, but it's become like a thing, in my work because it's a thing that a
Yeah.
person does. And back to the topic. So the thing that having your realizing what your niche is does for you then is helping you define, I suppose, what's important to you in your writing journey in terms of who you collaborate with, for examples, the places you submit to, even the kind of work you read. Um, I personally don't read work that devalues women for whatever reason, for shock value, for artistic grandstanding, for whatever excuse you have. If your work is one that reflects women in a derogatory manner or in the women and Muslims, actually, I don't have enough time to sit down and, you know, spend time with that kind of
Yeah.
work
Right.
anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, I mean, I get that people have different experiences and people have a right to their opinions or whatever, but this is not something that I want to spend my time or my effort or my energy or even be associated with, in any form or way. So I think that for me, that's one of the most important things of knowing what your niche is, because it then helps you to set your boundaries in terms of your work, your artistic vision for what your work would be like. There are places or people I wouldn't submit my work to because I don't think that we would see eye to eye on that. So if I know somebody to be overly misogynistic, for example, or somebody who's known to be an Islamophobe, or somebody who is very, very derogatory of, for example, Black people or Africans, I wouldn't engage in those places. I wouldn't engage with that work. I wouldn't,
Well, it's
all
not
of
even
those
just
things.
that you wouldn't submit to them because you wouldn't see eye to eye, but you wouldn't want your work
My work,
having their imprint on it. You wouldn't want to be
exactly. I
associated
wouldn't
with
want to be
them. Yeah.
associated with it in any way or form. Yes. But you wouldn't know, or you wouldn't, you begin to quite, decipher those limits for yourself when you know what your work stands for. That's where your whole niche thing comes to. What do I want my work to represent? When somebody hears Muti'ah Badruddeen, what comes to their mind?
I think
So
that
I think
definitely
that
means
that's
what your work stands for. What's your
yes.
what your work stands for and
I,
and then you can set those boundaries.
Exactly. But if you don't know that, then it becomes difficult for you to, be able to set the boundaries.
Yeah.
And the more, of course, as time passes, the more you work. And to say, and I think that one of the pushback that people, when you're having that conversation about niching down as an author, that people have is, oh, your work should be varied and should be, you should be able to write far and wide. You shouldn't limit yourself or whatever. And I say that having your own niche does not mean that your work is one thing or your work is limited or your work or that you do not explore the boundaries of what is considered your artistic talents. It just means that you know what your work represents, you know the message that you're holding on to, you want to know what values your work and yourself and your authorial brand represents. And I think that that's really important, not just for those boundaries, that issues that we've talked about, but also for you to be able to fulfill your goals. You're not just flailing all over the place. You're not just looking at every and anything.
Not wasting
Sometimes
your
you
time.
exactly. Sometimes you get opportunities in quotes, but then you look at them and you realize, no, that's not right for me, for my brand, for my work. And that's fine. You're not going to get every single opportunity. So you shouldn't even be trying anyways. So if it's not going to serve your work and your purpose, you shouldn't even be wasting your time. So that I think that that's another really important reason, why you should know what your niche is and stick with it. And I like to tell people that when people say, oh, but you're going to be limited, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what are you talking about? When we hear the big authors and writers, you know what their niche is. You can even, if I say Stephen King, for example, you know what I'm talking about. And
Yeah.
I haven't read a Stephen King in, I don't even know, maybe over 20 years. But if I still, come across his tweets, for example, on Twitter, I know, oh, this is Stephen King.
I'm
Jeffrey
sorry, I
Archer,
missed what you said.
Sorry, I said I haven't read Stephen King. Stephen King.
Oh, Stephen King. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what his, yeah.
But you know what his work is about. Or Jeffrey Archer, for example. I haven't read Jeffrey Archer since I was a teenager, but I know that you're expecting some legal intrigues and some mystery. So that's their thing. Or even more recently, Nicholas Sparks. I remember there was I used to do this thing in Saudi whenever I go to the bookstore and I find a Nicholas Sparks. It is always, shelved in the romance section. And then I just take them and remove them from the romance section and go put them elsewhere because, hello, this guy does not write romance. This guy does not write romance. I mean, you find a different category you want to put it, but this is not romance. If you're
the difference between
romance,
romantic and romances.
And romance, because all this guy is going to do is make you cry your eyes out. And why are you putting it in romance for people who are looking for a happily ever after? Like, why do you want to torture people?
Yes. And so and okay,
sorry,
so
go ahead.
This way that you talked about, like Stephen King, Jeffrey Archer, Nicholas Sparks, Danielle Steele, who else? Who's the guy who does? Oh my God, what's his name? James Patterson.
James Patterson.
Exactly what they are.
Immediately, you know what they're writing.
And think about how many books those people sell.
They have written.
How many they have written, how many they sell, how they are actually making their livings at their writing. And now try to think of a person who writes in all kinds of different genres that has the same, has that same status that they're just
because
aren't.
It's not possible.
In order to be a success, you have to
pick, you have to pick your lane and stick with it. What is this Nora Roberts, this romance woman?
Yes. She was the other one I was trying to think of.
She writes the same thing over and over and over and over again. Like, why do we then tell, people who are, and I think that argument of you shouldn't pick a niche, you shouldn't be limited, blah, 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 it's usually leveled at us who are in the margins, the marginalized voices, the racialized voices. Why do we then tell us that, we can't do one thing and do it well? We must be.
It's okay for other people to write about our issues.
But when we want to write our issues, it becomes,
we write our issues. Yeah. Then we're labeled as a one-trick pony, which is different than somebody with a niche. SubhanAllah.
Which is interesting because all these names that we just mentioned, all these authors that we just mentioned, they're literally one whatever ponies. They write the same stories at the center of all of their whatever. It's one same story that they keep writing, and we still keep buying their books. We can still keep reading their books. I can't say because I read, I was a Sheldon girl when I was growing up, Sidney Sheldon. I read all of his works, unless I didn't find it. I read Sidney Sheldon, and I would not say, because I've read so many Sidney Sheldons, I wouldn't read the next one. No, because once I said the Sheldon name, I'm getting a Sheldon because hello, it's Sheldon. So if they can keep writing the same stories over and over again, why can't we do the same thing for ourselves? Why is it when it comes to us telling our own stories, then you begin to tell us that, it's the same thing over and over again. Anyways.
Yeah. So how do we logistically once we've decided like what our niche is, besides not submitting in other, to other imprints or to other, like publications that we know don't share our values, how do we actively establish ourselves as someone that has that niche?
Well, first things first is now you know what your niche is. You're going to have to write a really good, you have to make sure that your work is really good. And I know we keep coming back to it, but it's very important. Your product has to be able to speak for itself. So you have to write it, like your work has to be good, first things first. And then when it is done and you find opportunities, which you have to actively chase, of course, you also have to promote ourselves. And we talked about this too, I think a couple of lives ago. One of the problems that we have as Muslim women is we don't do enough promotion, generally speaking. We don't talk about our work enough. And so people don't know that you have that work. So, and if they don't know, then how do they know that we do this thing where we are self-effacing and we are trying to be very humble. But in a world where everybody's grandstanding, everyone just leaves you behind because nobody cares, what you're doing with your work. So it's important to promote it and talk about it with authority because that's what you're doing. I when I first came into the public sphere, the social media and all of that, you find people who don't have a quarter of the qualifications that you have, and they are the ones who are on the panels and they are talking and they are making all of the noise. And this is not just, okay, fine, writing. I came into writing space really late, but even in my field, in reproductive health, for example, they are the people who are there and they are talking, and you, with all of your years of experience, are just looking and you're thinking, oh my God, because nobody's going to come and meet you and ask you if you don't talk about it. So if you've decided that this is your niche and you're working in this space, you're writing in this space, then you have to put your voice and your mouth and your whatever behind that, and you have to sell yourself because that's what you do.
And to not do it, sorry, but to not do it is a disservice to the readers because
they wouldn't know.
Who are the grandstanders?
Yeah, they would, because they wouldn't know, and all they will ever know is the other people that are making all of the noise. One of the things that I try to do with my work, with my writing, is, I keep proclaiming. For example, if I'm writing my new bios now, I always talk about how I'm writing mostly contemporary stories that deal with African Muslim women, because that's what I want my work to be known for, the fact that I write stories that deal with everyday lives of African Nigerian Muslim women. It's important to me that, in the future, sometimes, inshallah, when people are talking about Muslim women authors, African Muslim women authors, Muslim women fiction, my work, my name has a stand there. But for me to be able to do that, I have to produce the work to support all of the, talking, but I also have to talk to put the work out there. So it's kind of a balance of the two of them.
Yeah.
Really. You have to really do the writing, but then you also have to push the writing out and make sure that it's out there. But then it goes back to the whole niche thing, because if you don't even know what your work is about, you just be like, I write Muslim stories.
Yeah.
And people will just be like, okay, so, because people not even the Muslims don't even always care about the Muslim stories. But you have to be able to tell us why your Muslim stories are important. What is it about your stories that is important? Or why should I listen to what you have to say? What is relevant about what you're writing? And so for me personally, that's why I talk about why my work is contemporary stories about Nigerian or African Muslim women who are, and what it means to be women in this day and age and time, whatever, dealing with all those issues.
Yes. And it's so hard when you're an author and you're trying to get that elevator pitch when somebody just asks you, or when you have to put something about what you, and so when we think about it as what is my niche, what are my values, that's much easier to craft than what are my stories about.
What are my stories about? Yes.
Yeah. And I also wanted to say that we need to start talking about being people who write Muslim stories, so that the people who came up when I was first Muslim, like in the late 80s and early 90s, who think this is part of the problem. They think Muslim fiction and they think, oh, boring, didactic, like some. We need to let them know this literature, which is real literature, characters who grow, who change, who make mistakes, who struggle, who, all of that stuff. This is what Muslim fiction has evolved into. Because there are Muslims, like you said, like sometimes are interested. Sometimes they actively avoid it because they don't want to be preached. And that's not what we're about anymore. It doesn't mean it doesn't have lessons. It doesn't mean it doesn't have themes and learning and growing, but it's not preaching.
It's not preaching, definitely. I remember when Reiki and Z first won the Spring Women Author Prize in Nigeria, and there was a lot of, who is she? What is this book? Like, because people didn't know me. I was, especially outside of Muslim spaces, nobody knew me and my work. And then there was this book that was so obviously Muslim in the blurb and the description and everything. And there was me, obviously. Not like you can miss the fact that I was so Muslim. So there were a lot of people that were, who is she? And there was a bit of hesitance in the way, people receive the publicity that comes with, winning an award. And as an award-winning book, you immediately see, the jump in your sales. But for me, it took a bit of, but then the more the organizers started talking about it and organizing for me to meet book groups, and I started interacting with readers and more people were reading it and then posting reviews, people started going to buy the book and started, so it became like a domino effect, so to speak.
It became like
oh my God,
and it became a destination book. People sought it out.
Yeah. And then people started saying things like, I didn't expect to relate with this book. When I first saw it, I thought it was going to be so Muslim. And then I went and I read it and I was like, oh my God. And I had non-Muslims say things like, this is Muti'ah Badruddeen wrote a love letter to Muslim women. Like, my mind is blown. Like,
that's beautiful.
Like, it was a really beautiful experience to find people. I would go in literary spaces because they organize so many of those book club meets and stuff. I would go in a book club that are full of Nigerians, yes, but not from my tribe, and they were Muslim, non-Muslim, and we would sit and we have conversations about this book, and they would tell me about how, I never thought about what it meant for Muslim women in hijab. I never understood this. I didn't understand that. And it was just a really, alhamdulillah, it was really overwhelming experience, so to speak, because you do this work and you think that you're doing this for the Muslims and but then other people see it and they realize that, and this is the whole purpose of the whole thing, the fact that we are Muslims and we are telling our stories, and other people can then read these stories and realize that our humanity is not in any way in doubt or in question. We are just humans,
Yes,
and we have these struggles. Exactly. We have these shared struggles. We have these shared aspirations. We have these shared lives, really, of what it means to be woman or human or whatever. Anyways, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So can you talk to us a little bit about your own personal experience with the benefits of having that niche? Like, you told us that there are some places who won't accept any pieces that have allusions at all to sexual violence against women. So, okay, so we don't even consider that a disadvantage. Okay, khalas, that's their deal. This is our deal. We do our deal. But tell us about how much easier it became to submit, to market yourself, to embody your work when you finally figured that out.
I think that for me personally, the biggest advantage is the fact that once I knew what my work was about, what my niche was, I wasn't wasting time on all the things that didn't align with my values, with my niche. But also how do I say that? I wasn't I was able to then power ahead in terms of, okay, this is the next step of what I want to do with my career, and then move there. There are other places that I, have like veiled hostility in terms of very, very aggressively secular. We don't want anything to do with any form of religiosity or whatever in the work kind of thing. So those kind of spaces, you kind of learn to weave
Yeah. You just
them out of
automatically filter them. Yeah.
exactly weave them out of your. And once you do that, then it streamlines what is in front of you, what is obtainable, but also what is, what's the word? What is advantageous to you in terms
Mm.
of how your journey is then going to evolve. Because if I was still wasting time with all of these people, then I would be getting so much more rejections. I would be dealing with the mindset that will come from getting all of that rejection, and that's going to affect my growth. But because I wasn't, I knew that, okay, they weren't ready for me, or I wasn't willing to play their games. So that made it easier for me to be able to.
Yeah, it's so much more difficult. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think the other thing then is people who actually look out for you, or who come to look for you because they know that this is what you stand for. So I've had people approach me and say, we want, recently somebody who was writing a Netflix thing, I think it's going to be a movie, and they reached out to me and they were like, okay, so we have this Nigerian Muslim woman character, and we want you to just be there.
Yay, the consultant.
Exactly, just be there and tell us whenever something's off with this script. So it was their writer's room. I just sat in and just, oh no, at this point, that reaction doesn't seem, that kind of thing. Yeah, so people would come to look for you based on the expertise that you have decided for yourself is what you are standing
and established on. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, that's the main things for me.
When you first begin, you might think that limiting your audience is a disadvantage, but it becomes such an advantage, and that's what you become known for.
Yes. And the thing about the audience, limiting your audience, is it's not actually a disadvantage, because you get the loyalty of your core audience. You get the loyalty of your core audience. And for book readers, that's so important, because once you have a loyal reader, they would buy all of your books. Like they would literally look for everything that you have written. And because book readers, we are a lot more diverse as readers than we are as writers. So even if even if a person is not your core reader, but they were like associates or friends or somebody who is a loyal reader or core reader of yours, they will tell them about your work because they love it so much. They will say, oh no, but this person should write this. And the other person will be like, because she's the reader, she'll be like, okay, let me try it. And then they will read your work and they will also come in. So your core readers are like your most faithful readers. They're golden. They're definitely more important. I don't want to use the word more important, but they are like the most important part of your readership as an author is the core loyal readers that you have, because they pull in people who love your work, people who, are loyal to you. They don't stop talking about your work. They will hype you to their friends, their families. They will gift out your book, and then those ones will come in
on their
exactly. So I think that when you think that you're limiting your author, your readers by defining your niche or whatever, it's just because we haven't taken time to think about the way readers operate, so to speak.
Yes. What a great insight into readership and how it works, being a reader and how it works. Nice.
Because it's a different thing from, say, TV, where people just be like, I'm bored, and then they just sit down. And readers are more intentional, Rarely do you go to the bookshop, for example, and just be like, I'm just picking out books just because. More often than not, exactly. More often than not is because, I read this person in her previous book was good. Or, I like this cover, which, yes, we totally do. Yeah. Or, the librarian gives you a recommendation or something. But we are a lot more intentional about our choices in terms of reading than people who watch TV.
And I think that I think the internet makes that even more so. Because you go to the library or the bookstore, you could be captivated by a book that you just happen to pass by and pick up. But when it's online, you almost have to search for either a keyword or the title or the author or the, yeah. So
or if you're like me, you have to go through Bookstagram and read a couple of reviews before you decide you want to be bothered. So
yes, is this worth? Yeah. Yes, exactly. Oh my goodness.
and they are very forgiving in that even if, for one reason or the other, they read a book of yours that they don't like, they will go and say, I generally love this author's work, even though I didn't really like this one. But,
yeah, that doesn't mean that they're never going to read anything by you again.
Exactly. They will still come back unless you do something like totally egregious or something. Yeah. But readers tend to be a lot more loyal than any other media out there.
Really. Yeah. That's interesting because I have one of my very favorite authors is Fredrik Backman, the Swedish author who wrote A Man Called Ove, which came out as a movie in Sweden, and then in America, A Man Called Otto with Tom Hanks. Okay, so I've read every single book by him, and then I've read a couple that I was like, meh, okay, whatever. But still, I'm like, when is Fredrik Backman's next book? Because I just feel like those were flukes or something. I just didn't connect.
Yeah, because that's just the thing. That's just the thing. It's you just be like, okay, I didn't like that one, but okay, whatever. You would still go back and read their work because you've developed this relationship with their work, and so you trust them, so to speak, and you just keep going back.
I so appreciate this look at niche. It is not at all what I expected that we would talk about, and it went in the direction that I personally needed to hear. I loved it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Niche is now our best friend, you guys. All right. It is also
or like the marketing people say, branding, your brand.
Yes, your brand. Your brand. Your authorial values, your values as an author.
Your values as an author.
I love it. Your boundaries. Okay, so I just wanted everybody to know that alarm was not for, okay, we're done. It was for, it's time to go pick up, do the school run. So it wasn't really related to us, and we still have time. So that we can still do Stop the Presses.
Oh my goodness. I forgot about that.
Wahaha, you think that we would let you escape? All right, question number 1. For those of you who don't know, every time we have a Daybreak Live, we do a Stop the Presses section at the end, which is where we stop talking about things literary and ask 3 random questions just for fun and just to get to further know our guest. All right, so Muti'ah, tell us about school lunches when you were young.
I grew up in Nigeria. We don't have school lunches.
Ah, okay. Did you take your lunch, or did you just get out in time to eat lunch at home?
You take your lunch. More likely you go buy some snack at the school kiosk. So it was we call it break time. What we have in Nigeria is called break time. So it's like 30 minutes, usually I think by 11:30 a.m. to 12 noon. And you just go out of your class. If you wanted, you could stay in your class if you didn't have anything to do outside. If you had money, you go to the kiosk and buy food or snack or whatever. It was just a break, really. And it wasn't a lunch period.
If you took your snack from home, what did you take? Or what did other kids take?
I never took my snack from home. My mother was a nurse midwife. She was always working just like me. So no, I never took lunch from home. When I was really young, I think we used to take either biscuits or cookies and some juice or something. But for the most part, especially by high school, I went to boarding school for high school. So in high school, you just go buy something at the kiosk.
Okay.
And eat.
So fascinating because everybody's lunch experience or break time experience all over the world are so unique and so interesting, and people have such vivid memories of them.
I mean, we see American high school dramas and all of the lunch break
Oh yeah.
cafeteria thing that always happens, and we just smile like, Americans are so funny.
We can't deny it. We cannot deny it. All right. The second question is, tell us about, okay, first of all, do you have sisters?
Yes, I have two sisters.
Okay. Tell us about clothes with your sisters. Clothes borrowing, clothes stealing, clothes. How did you?
Now or when we were growing up?
You were young.
Because now we're on 3 different continents. Okay, let's see. Growing up. So my immediate younger sibling, I'm the first child. My immediate younger sibling is 3 years younger than me. My other sister is like 9 years younger than me. So I like to tell my children that we didn't even grow up together. I left home for boarding school when she was like a baby or something. So, but my
Okay.
immediate younger sister was the one who used to steal my clothes. It wasn't borrowing, it was stealing. She used to steal my clothes. And I mean, we are Nigerians, we're Yoruba Nigerians, which meant that we do a lot of, we have this culture, we call it anko. It's actually an English thing where you say something and company, and then you
Oh,
write it as
oh,
and
yes, yes,
C and
yes.
co. So in Nigeria, we call that anko because your parents will go and get the same fabric and then they will make it into garments for everyone. And so you all wear the same thing, maybe for Eid or whatever, you're wearing literally the same thing. And so we used to have that. And my sister would she wear out her own skirt, top, whatever it was, she wear it out. I have no idea how she used to wear it out, but within a few months, her own clothes are looking shabby and they are torn or whatever, then she will steal mine and start wearing mine. And then I
And
would be,
nobody could
I'll tell her,
even
I'll be like,
know because they look the same.
exactly. And they'll be like, that's my top. And she's like, no, it's mine. I'm like, no, that is my, your own does not look that new. No, it's mine. And she would have, she would have hidden her own or thrown it somewhere where I couldn't find it. So I could never prove it that it was mine. But I knew, and she knew that I knew that it was mine. Mm.
Oh
And then I
man.
went to boarding school. And I went to boarding school and she inherited everything. I literally could not find anything when I come back from school on break. She would have stolen everything.
Forget it. She appropriated it all.
Everything.
All right. Tell us about a significant weather event that you lived through or that you remember.
Oh, I think it was in 2017-ish. I was in Khaybar in Saudi Arabia. Khaybar is a small town in the Medina province of Saudi Arabia, the same town of the Battle of Khaybar.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was a storm, there was a thunderstorm. I remember I was working and it was a daytime storm. It was very bad. So everywhere became dark and there was lightning and thunder and all of that, except that there was a young guy who I didn't live. Well, I suppose I lived through it. So this young guy goes on the roof. You know the way the Arab houses are. We have a roof portion. So he goes on the roof to capture the weather for the Instagram, I suppose. I don't know, to take a video. And he's struck by lightning. Yeah. And I remember I was on call or I was on duty. I don't remember, but I was in the hospital when they brought him in, and it was a very humbling experience for the entire town because it was a small town. We all pretty much all knew ourselves. And my kids and I lived there for years and years. So everybody knew us. We knew everyone. We knew his family. So it was, and so
Yeah,
the ambulance brought him in, and it was just a horrible, horrible experience.
yeah, Latif. Did he not survive?
No, he did not survive.
Oh, Latif. Yeah, Allah, Allah, Allah yarhamu.
I mean, yeah.
Aymallah, yani the weather is something that you got to respect. SubhanAllah, that's the power.
Yeah.
We don't think, I live in Kansas, and when we see a tornado warning, we go out to the porch and to look, to watch,
Yeah, to see. Yeah, I think also
right.
he wasn't expecting that too. No one was expecting that.
It
He
doesn't
just
really, like, I lived in Jeddah, and there's like very little lightning, even when it pours rain. From
No,
what
but
I
Medina, we got really, really funny thunderstorms sometimes.
Mm.
I remember we got a couple of hailstorms as well. The weather could be, but even then, I don't think anyone really expected that,
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
Mm. Um, so we kind of came to a place here, but I want to ask you then one more question to kind of lighten our mood again. Standard or automatic cars? What do you like to drive?
Okay, so I don't understand this American thing of when there's an easier version, somebody's still holding on to the more difficult version because why? I learned to drive with a standard manual shift, but I mean, automatic cars are so much easier. Why would I want to drive a standard car now? Makes no sense. It reminds me of my sister. My sister, when she was going to have a baby, she's in the US, and she said, when she went there and they were counseling her, blah blah blah, and they were like, we do natural, childbirth, and if you want to have the full experience. And she was like, I come from a place where women are dying in childbirth. Please give me all the drugs. Why would you want to do the more difficult one? Because I don't know, it's an American thing. I don't
Yeah, this is
understand
an
it.
American thing. It's a whole philosophy, and there's so many things that go into it. Oh my gosh. Now I want to do Daybreak Live on that.
No, because when I was having kids, or even with my patients, I wish I could give you some pain relief. You have all of that, and you're telling me you want to do natural because you're supposed. This is how nature intended. Nurse, God gave us this knowledge of pain relief. Why are we suffering on principle? Please. Anyways, different strokes.
Oh
So
my
yeah, manual for me.
God. Manual for you? I thought you said
No, sorry,
automatic.
automatic for me.
Automatic.
Automatic for me. Automatic for me. Sorry, I do not.
Well, I love manual because they're so more responsive. The car is much more responsive, and it's like a relationship with your car. It's not just like, okay, my car is my servant and it just goes when I push the go. It's like, let me feel when it's time to change the gear. Let me feel when it's time to oh my gosh,
It's
so much
an American thing. It's a car. It gets me from here to there.
things. I'm gonna put it on my what do you call it? On my Instagram. Just like American things. All right, my love. Thank you so much for being here. Inshallah, we will see you next month. Everybody come back for another Daybreak Live where we always find insights we didn't even know we were after. All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you for having me. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.